Jonathan's joined us. Welcome, Jonathan.
Yeah, thanks, Blades.
Lekker to have you in the studio.
Thanks, thank you.
First of all, I've been singing the praises of A.B. de Villiers. And the fact that last night, unashamedly, I had a little tear in my eye because I watch IPL T20. I watch it pretty regularly. And I was just saying how wonderful it was to see A.B. scoring 89 in 40 balls. Without doubt, the match of the tournament. What happened was that A.B. batted brilliantly. I tell you, I had a tear in the eye because about the second or third last over, he took Dale Steyn apart, but he hit him for 3 sixes in the over.
We were at the airport and we didn't see the game. What was his reaction?
What happened was that Dale Steyn went up to A.B. and it showed it clearly on television. He went up to A.B., gave him a hug, ruffled his hair, and just you can see him just saying, just unreal. The crowd would, they are royal challengers, so they chant RCB. Then they started chanting AB. Then they started chanting ABC. I tell you, I was blubbing. It was just phenomenal. Fabulous stuff. Jonathan is going to talk us through a little bit of rugby. I first met Jonathan, I think, how old were you? About 12?
My brother actually played...
Did you not come to our clinic?
No, I didn't used to be at your clinics, but...
your brother did?
My brother came. He was a very enthusiastic rugby player.
Yeah.
And the first
Didn't
time
he
that
play
we
for
met...
the Sharks under 20s?
He played for the Sharks B team for about 5 years, and then eventually he got one cap for the A team. Yeah, against Northwest.
Hooker?
Yeah, hooker.
Yeah. How's that for a memory?
Yeah,
salty,
excellent.
schnolly.
Yeah, so anyway, so just for the benefit of the public, so I met Blade. Well, I was reffing a game. It was my third or fourth game as a referee with the old Transvaal Referee Society. It was played on Wanderers.
Oh, on the cabbage patch.
Wanderers G Field, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
And Blades came strolling over with his mates from a lunch, or towards a lunch, and I already had 6 guys in the bin. So, I mean, the guys were probably old enough to be my dad, but...
Who were Wanderers playing?
Edenvale. Yeah.
I'll never forget it. Wanderers were playing, that was the Wanderers Sables team.
Yes.
Which was the old bullies. Beyond John, you was what, 17?
Yeah, I was 17.
He was 17, and by the time I got to the field, there were 6 guys in the sin bin. and that was the sort of started, or the way Jonathan started at 17.
Yep.
That's great.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
How many tests have you blown?
70.
70.
Yeah.
70 exactly.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
70 done and dusted.
More than anybody in history.
At the moment.
There's
a few guys.
Who can beat your record?
I think there's a few guys that are in the mix. So Craig is just approaching 50. There's been a proliferation of test matches.
Absolutely.
So obviously what happens in the era of Derek Bevan, or what happens in the era of Clive Norling, they perhaps got 3 tests per year. At the moment, the guys are getting between 6 and 8 tests a year. Yeah. So, obviously they do more games. But that's what benchmarks are. The benchmarks don't ever belong to you. They always belong to the game of rugby.
Yeah, it was a little bit like, in my commentating career between about 1986 and 1992, South Africa played about 7 tests. Donnie Gerber represented South Africa for 10 years and played, 22 tests.
Yeah.
Guys like Nas Botha, those guys would have played 100 test matches. Yeah. Donnie Gerber, Nas Botha and the like would have played 100 test matches. Jonathan, right, so let's go through and talk a little bit about... I've got a question for you guys. Quite interesting question. And I've been asked this before, so I looked it up. Can a guy, if a penalty is awarded, can a substitute be made and the substitute come on and kick the goal?
Yeah.
He
It
can.
never used to be like that, but they can do it now.
Ah.
Yeah. You can interchange subs at penalties.
It happened on the weekend. One of the commentators said, "Interesting question: can a sub come on and kick a goal?"
Yeah.
But he can.
Yeah. When I started,
You
you couldn't.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what were your observations?
Blades, it was quite a good weekend. I've got this like little tipping group, and I fell short. I'm embarrassed to say I got all the games right except for the Stormers Highlanders. I've been tipping the Stormers the whole bloody season, and they've let me down every
He lives
time.
in Cape Town, I must tell you.
And I went against them this week. I thought the Highlanders performed really well against the Sharks, and they are my surprise package. Whether
they were unbeaten. Well, not unbeaten, but they're coming off a big run.
The
I think
Highlanders.
they'd beaten
Yeah.
the Bulls and the Force.
Yeah, no, they've done well.
And the Sharks before the Stormers.
Yeah, look, I think they actually lost to the Force, but I mean, be that as it may, it doesn't really matter.
I don't know, Jonathan.
Go to your records.
All right, I'll
quickly.
go. You carry
your
on. I'll go
records.
to my record.
So I'll just. You don't have to apologise. I'll just.
Okay, but you
know,
will if
obviously-
I'm right.
Yeah, I will.
Okay.
So so I thought it was, and I think Super Rugby for us at the moment is a little bit challenging. I think, I'd be a little bit worried if I was the South African aficionados. We are occupying all the last dreg positions on the logs, and our top teams are underperforming, and even the Sharks, they are top of the log, and there's great credit, for them in doing so. But I'm not really convinced that they've put together 80-minute performances, and despite their win on this tour against the Rebels,
I'm sorry.
I still think that they were exposed. Yeah.
I apologise.
No, that's right. 33-31.
It was 31-29.
29. Okay.
I meant, man, they beat the Rebels.
The Highlanders beat the Rebels.
Anyway, look.
Yeah,
sorry.
No,
I
look,
think the Highlanders.
Let me tell you, I've made the point already this morning that I think that over the weekend there was a bit of an improvement. That I know we worried about the fact that our teams occupying the lower positions apart from the Sharks, but I think there was a bit of positive stuff going on. Whereas before that, I was really worried about the way we were playing.
Look, I think if you look at the Bulls, I mean, let's just start somewhere. If you look at the Bulls and how they've performed, they lost every single game on tour, I think, by 7 points or less.
Yeah.
And that was quite surprising for me because they traditionally don't travel well. This is a team that lost, I think, between 9 and 12 players, first team players in the last 2 years.
Sure.
And so they're in a big rebuilding phase, and their young guys have really stood up. And I'm a massive fan of Frans Ludiker. Frans Ludiker will surpass Ewan McKenzie at some stage as the most kept Super Rugby coach of all time. He's a very quiet man who just gets about his business without a lot of fuss. But he's spent a bit of time with the Lions, but he's been part of a very successful Bulls setup for a long time. So great credit to him, and also to Victor for coming back and galvanizing and gelling this team into a team which is actually competitive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so and I thought they played very well. Again, it's their home ground, and you'd expect them to win there, but they still played well. For me, they're not the finished article because I think that the game plan needs attention. I'd like to see us developing more along the lines of the world leaders, which are New Zealand, and trying to get a game plan going where we include game players, steppers, and not just big thundering runners with a ball and a very good kicking game. So I mean that's just my preference. I'm not I wouldn't say that I've necessarily got a better handle on things.
Yeah.
But I think in order to challenge New Zealand, we're going to have to do that.
Yeah, I'm scheduled to do a few school games, Kesoffies and Monas playing somebody, and then a game in Potch. And I have been of the opinion that we're playing this sort of, what do they call it, stump car rugby, because we play it at school. And I'll be interested to see what the development is. I had quite a long chat to Davy Snyman, who's been involved in coaching Paul Roos, which is Simon's old school. And trying to get, Davy was saying he's trying to get his backs to be more creative and and not just run into people.
Yeah.
And you know, the New Zealand way is to run through the branches of the tree, not run into the tree.
Yeah.
And we tend to run into the tree a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that's a legacy of trying to stick to what our traditional strengths are. But I still maintain that we can develop, our players. We've got as much enthusiasm as anybody else in the world in respect of our players.
No question.
Yeah, and we've got a good player base, and I think we can develop, those Donny Gerbers of the world.
Yeah. We've got a few tweets here, Jono. Gary Late, I'd like to hear Refjk's comment about the Sharks game, specifically the Mvovo try that should have been a penalty try. That's your opinion, Gary. Your opinion, Jono.
Gary's 100% right. There were two decisions in that Sharks game which I write for a weekly column called Rate the Ref, and anybody can go and have a look at that site. But I've tagged on to two incidents in this particular game where the referee made very, very poor calls in the context. I've said before, this is not a ref bashing exercise, but at the same time, we need to be honest and be accountable when there's something which is just unacceptable. And at this level, I'm sorry to say, but Andrew Leese's, his judgment and his knowledge of the law was not good enough. We had an incident where Hegarty, the Rebels fly half, was chasing a ball back with Mvovo. They lunged for the ball at the same time, and Hegarty batted the ball. He batted the ball over the dead ball line.
Yeah.
And the law clearly states that, but not for the action of whatever happens, would a try most probably have been scored.
And it would have.
And he said a try. He said that a try would not definitely have been scored, or not certainly have been scored, which to me tells me that he didn't understand the law, that he didn't know the law. The law doesn't speak about certainty. It speaks about probability.
Yeah.
Now, in all probability, if you look at that incident, would a try most probably have been scored? Of course it would have, but not for that action. Mvovo was lunging for the ball. What he was trying to do was catch the ball and fall on it. Hegarty was slightly behind him, got in front and tapped the ball away. Now, that's all you've got to ask.
He didn't tap it, Jono. He smacked it.
He smacked the ball away,
He
yeah.
smacked it.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a deliberate, huge smack.
Yeah.
I sat there saying, penalty try.
Yeah.
You
And
know.
it's a very obvious decision, and it's not good enough at this level. It's not good enough.
Okay, that answers you, Gary.
Yeah, and then there's-
and I'm sure a whole lot of other rugby fans, and particularly Shark supporters. Now, let me what's the word? Let me see if I picked up your next point. How they allowed that try when who was it? The Sharks captain went back to talk to his players.
Yeah,
And they took the tap penalty. Well, first of all, he didn't tap it out of his hands. Okay.
Yeah, exactly that, Blade.
And
So
in fact, Tace Brits has asked us that question. Please ask JK the question, quick try against the Sharks. How was that allowed?
yeah, so the ref, who I do think, by the way, is probably the most promising ref in Australia at the moment, Andrew Leese. But once again, if they're going to drop Stuart Berry for subpar performances, then this kind of performance has to be in line for something similar. Because this is what the public's asking. The public's asking when something is so basic that everybody else understands it to be incorrect, but the guy in the middle, who should have a superior understanding, gets it wrong, then they start asking questions about accountability. Now, in this particular case that you're speaking about, Andrew Leese was quite within his powers to ask the captain to speak to his team. He actually asked both captains to speak to the team. The one chose not to, the other one chose to. And while he was speaking to the team, instead of first going to the captain and saying, I'm going to blow time on, he blew time on without consulting the team.
Well,
Right.
also, when he was still addressing his players.
No, that's what I'm saying. So,
Yeah.
so he instead of saying to the captain, "Look, I'm going to call time on now."
Willem Alberts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's start the game again. He didn't, and as you correctly pointed out, the tap was not a correct tap. It was an incorrect restart. The incorrect restart is either a scrum to the to the Sharks, or if he wants to allow them to take the penalty because he hasn't given the mark or because for a whole bunch of reasons, so then he can allow the penalty to be taken correctly. But to allow the try was preposterous. It's absolutely preposterous, and it put the Rebels back in the game. They then have a bonus point, and it put the Sharks at risk of losing a game where, I wouldn't say they were dominant, but they were comfortably in front. That reminded me of the Paul Honus. Paul Honus was the referee.
O'Gara.
Yes,
I was
in the
commentating
Ireland
that game.
South Africa game.
Diabolical.
Yeah, and I just Blades. I've put up my hand when I've made bum calls in matches, both international and local Currie Cup games, and I don't see a hell of a lot of that going around. But be that as it may, this type of decision or decision making is, for me, at best a lapse in concentration. Mm-hmm. At worst, it's a malfunction of understanding of the game of rugby. The game of rugby, any sport for that matter, is a contest. Once the referee allows a team to do something that they shouldn't do, then they've taken the contest away. Mm. And in this particular case, I think the referee or the refereeing team or whatever it was, they're very fortunate that the team that should have won the game actually ended up winning the game. So the fallout is not as bad.
Yeah, right. Okay, any other there was another one that I saw, the Lions-Chiefs game, where the Warren Whiteley was obstructed.
Yeah.
Did you see that?
Yep, and I agree with you on that as well.
Where, in fact, the commentators who were there, I think Jeff Wilson was one of them, said there's no way that Whiteley was obstructed.
Yeah. No, I would agree. I think that there were 2 TMO calls in that game as well, which were iffish at best. A later one where I felt that the ball was actually lost forward in a play in front of the carrier, ended up kicking it through and falling on it. I think it was the 3rd try to the Chiefs just before half time.
I didn't see that, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I think if we look big picture, Blades, the reality is that the TMO work this year has been substandard. It hasn't been good enough. We're talking about the top flight. We're not talking about club rugby, which demands a certain standard, first team club rugby.
You. Yeah. There have been too many iffy calls.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, in that instance, the TMO said that Warren was obstructed. The commentators said there's no ways he was obstructed. The one thing that the TMO might have thought is we've had this situation where players are getting ahead of the ball and obstructing around rucks and mauls and things like that, and so maybe he was applying that more than actually looking at the possibility that Warren could have caught the player.
Once again, my sense of sensibility and my judgment on that incident was that it was an incorrect call. I will say that Lyndon Bray is aware of the fact that my biggest bugbear in the tournament is not so much. I mean, obviously, I've made a bold statement to say that the TMO work hasn't been good enough. I don't think it has been. But my biggest bugbear in this year's competition, and it is typically a Southern Hemisphere problem, and particularly Australasian, it's not really the South African teams that do that, are that players are getting held, pulled down and tackled in and around the post-tackle area or ruck area where they don't want to participate in the game.
Yeah.
We had, and it's not, once again, this is not sort of inexperienced referees making mistakes. In the Reds Brumbies game 2 weeks ago, Steve Walsh, made some appalling decisions in respect of, Stephen Moore, Ed Quirk, going into a post tackle, then a ruck situation. Stephen Moore was in front of him, and he cleaned him and held on to him. And Moore tried to get out of it, and then couldn't. So hit him full-blooded punch in to the face. Genia went and scored. Incredibly, the try wasn't given, and nothing happened. Not even on review. Nothing happened to Moore on the field, and citing as well. Yeah. I mean, we're having off-field yellow cards for really some trivial events, and now something happened, full-blooded punch,
yeah,
and nothing happens.
Yeah,
and crazy.
Was there a tackle on Keegan Daniel that stood out for you this weekend?
No, I'll tell you what did happen. Jaco Paper was reffing a game where I think one of the Highlanders got taken out post-ruck and Vova went through and scored. And it was a very marginal decision by Jaco, but I totally understood why he gave it. And it's because the referees have been told to stamp out this, this wave of players holding other players back in and around the tackle.
Yeah.
And he reviewed it, and whilst you probably, you can't be sure that the player that got taken out actually could participate, you couldn't say that he definitely wouldn't have been able to make an offensive tackle. The worst one I saw was, Blades, was the Stormers against the Reds a few weeks ago, where Nizam Kar was literally pinned against the posts. He was pinned against the post by two Reds players, and the channel that he was supposed to defend, when they eventually let him go, and he walked he walked to the space where he was supposed to defend, the pick and drive happened, and they went straight through that hole and scored under the sticks. That was 7 points that should never ever have been given.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the type of things. So what I'm saying is, in these type of incidents with Jaco Paper, where the answer is grey, we're going to give the referee the benefit of the doubt. We're going to say, this is the way he saw it, and you don't agree with it, but I can understand why he gave it.
Yep.
But in these other incidents where this is being deliberately coached, it cannot be an accident that it happens over and over again. We all understand that. We're not fools. And nothing gets done about it. It's ludicrous. The Stormers, once again, they played against the Reds in the same game. There was an aerial assault every single time that they had a line out. The jumper was taken out. So that happened 5 times in the game, and only on the last time, was in the 78th minute or something, was there a warning. That is not good enough.
No,
Everyone understands that the Stormers, their best weapon is the maul at the moment. They're lacking a hell of a lot of confidence. It's not to say they don't have the players. I personally think they've got some fantastic players there. But the platform for setting up their attack is the maul. They were not allowed to maul once in that Reds game. Not once.
Well, that just shows you, if you're how you can get, in fact, neutralized in terms of your game plan and that type of thing, and how these results can have huge effect on players, on coaches, on people's livelihoods.
But we spoke a couple of weeks ago about, not specific, holding back. We spoke about jersey tugging a couple of weeks ago, and guys getting away with that. That's holding back, and it doesn't seem like anything's been done about that either.
No, that's the same theme that I've been alluding to, and I wouldn't say nothing's being done about it. The referees are completely aware of their obligation to rid the game of that, and I had a brief chat with Lyndon about it because I'm still in touch with him, and he is he's doing his best from a managerial point of view. But when there's so many referees missing it, so it starts to beg a different kind of question, that perhaps there needs to be a little bit more involvement from the TMO to make
your
sure
touch judges,
the assistant referees, to make sure that they've been upskilled so that they can see these kind of things. Because what the referees are saying is that it's so difficult to see what's happening beyond the ball, because they're looking at what's happening with the tackler and the tackled player and the ball presentation, and all this stuff is going on beyond the ball. For me, it's not good enough. It's just not good enough. The game demands a certain standard, and like I said to you earlier, Blades, what we should be looking at as match officials is to try and ensure that there is a fair contest. And at the moment, some of the contest is not fair.
Yeah, right. Duncan has been tweeting us furiously. Sorry, Blades, the Sharks versus Highlanders. The tackle on Daniels was against the Rebels. It was. Keegan been double tackled versus the Rebels. He was airborne and landed badly. That was Gary late. And then Duncan said Daniels was the tackle was against the Rebels, and he was picked up but looked like he jumped. Did you see
How the hell do these guys remember this?
No, I don't know.
How the hell do they do that?
Because they're rugby fans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
look, I think what Duncan's trying to say, just to answer the question, when a player jumps and through no action of the defender, the potential tackler, is then, he loses his footing, lands up on his head. Should the tackler be penalised? And for me, the answer is there has been a lot of hysteria since obviously the Brian O'Driscoll spear tackle in New Zealand with the British Lions. So we took going as far back as 2005. Sorry. Since 2005, I think the RB have tried to stamp out this whole issue of upending players, and to a large degree, it came about as a result of the way of tackling, where you unbalance a player by lifting the one leg and unbalancing him, and that unbalancing him sometimes ends up with a player being completely compromised. So it's a tackle technique which is being taught in the first place by all defensive coaches. So I mean that's what makes it difficult for us in the first place. In this particular case, the defender should not be penalised if Daniels jumped up in the air. The only time that the RB, and I must credit Joel Juch for the head of the RB referees, who brought out a long, it perhaps looks a bit long-winded, but it's not actually. It's given a whole bunch of scenarios where if a player, generally a fullback or one of the back three, jumps up in an attempt to win the ball, if he gets up there first, it is the responsibility of the team who kicked the ball to ensure that he comes down safely. And I think, and he painted a whole bunch of scenarios so that referees are now in no doubt as to what action they must take. Because there was a very important decision in the Ulster Saracens game where a player, Jared Payne, was sent off in the 4th minute of the game, and there was a lot of conjecture about whether the decision was correct or not. My personal opinion was that until the statement came out by Joel Juch, that action by the referee was quite a tough call to make. Quite tough on Ulster and probably ruined what would have been a fantastic game.
Yeah, well, the question I was going to ask is: are the players made aware of these judgments by referees, or the fact that in my opinion, and I reckon that I've studied the laws more than most people, apart from probably referees. That the fact that if the ball goes up in the air, if it's kicked up in the air and I am chasing, I am going to compete for the ball. I'm not going to be too worried about the safety of the guy jumping up to catch it.
Yeah, so that's why I say Blade. So that's not actually wrong, because in the past what they probably were saying, and that's what I was saying, is that player who was following up the kick ahead, the Gary Owen, he had his eyes firmly fixed on the ball.
And
My take on it was that's
you're
it.
thinking about is the safety of the guy who's opposite you.
Yeah, so that's what happened in this particular case. This player he never took his eyes off the ball. He was actually just carried on looking at the ball. But unfortunately, the Saracens fullback
fell badly.
Good, yeah, he fell badly. Actually, fell over this player Jared Payne, and fell onto his head neck area.
Payne got sent off.
And Payne got sent off in the 4th minute of the Heineken Cup quarter-final. And Ulster ended up losing the game. And that's why I say until the statement came out by Joel Juch, which I think is fantastic, because the laws, as they are written, are not good enough. Like I've told you on numerous occasions, there's a lot of laws written in the same ink as every other law, which are never applied.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And there's some that are selectively applied. So to throw the law book and say apply the law, well, that's also not good enough. So these kind of addendums that Joel has put out in respect of...
Well, I hope that this has been passed on to the coaches. I would assume that it's been passed on by the unions to the coaches and thereafter to the players. We had a situation where Stefan Wartemeyer was penalised for jumping, and Luwazi Mvovo fell badly.
Yes.
And the Lions were on the charge at the time.
Yes.
And in fact, I saw Johan Ackermann and JP Ferreira and the coaching staff at the airport, the Lions coaching staff at the airport, and they were bemoaning the decision and saying we were on a roll, and that decision sort of stopped our roll.
Yes, and I agreed with them.
Yeah.
I think at the time, before this thing was made clear by the IRB, I think that players from any team had equal rights to contest for possession.
Yeah.
And it didn't matter if you were a chaser or a defender. So now that they've redefined these roles, so obviously, now it's given referees and hopefully the public as well, because that's what rugby is a complex game, and the public, you're talking about, do the players get it? I think most of the top players get it. I'm not sure all the players get it.
And
certainly
the
not the
schoolboys
public,
get it.
and not the schoolboys,
Yeah,
and not the public.
Absolutely, yeah.